fascinating insight. Researchers have found that male criminals between the ages of 15 and 20 who had a son and not a daughter committed 25% fewer repeat crimes. Having a son apparently prompted a greater sense of responsibility than having a girl. Don't look at me like that. It's just the research, all right? A father may assume his son is more likely to imitate his criminality and so tries harder to be a better role model. That's the explanation, right? The effect of one father committing fewer crimes also led to a drop in offences committed by the rest of his peer group. These results led UCL professor Christian Dussman to declare crime is a social phenomenon and contagious. Assuming this, investing in crime reduction measures would have knock-on benefits that far outgrow their primary effects alone. If improving societal conditions and trusting ex-convicts with some responsibility can help to rehabilitate young offenders, isn't this where our policy focus should be? If you're left in any doubt, remember that reoffenders are more likely to keep reoffending. Just one criminal lifetime can inflict spiralling pressure on our justice system and impact multiple victims. Is that a cost worth risking?
OK, first of all, I see where he did some of his research, and it was in Denmark, which is hardly the criminal capital of the world, is it? The other is quite a nice place, in fact. So I come from quite a broken home. I was adopted.
A criminal background.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm going to allude to that in a minute. I have had a colourful past. Yeah. I've strayed off the way more than once. OK, and family has been important to me to rehabilitate. Responsibility has been even more important to rehabilitate myself. Once I had my son, OK, and I gave him a role model. He's become an officer within the military, and he's done very well. Only a few little problems I have with him, but nothing to speak of. Yeah. So I understand, and I fully appreciate that.
Did you feel different when you had a son?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But where I believe that we do fall down is that the punishment doesn't ever seem to fit the crime in this country, and we're not actually harsh enough on people either once they're incarcerated. I think they have it far too easy. And, although I appreciate, when they come out, they need to be rehabilitated, and family plays a massive part in that, and responsibility plays a massive part in that. Also part of this, rehabilitating people, that they need some sort of deterrent in the first place to stop them getting in trouble and not just rely on what they're going to get afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, the prisons are overcrowded, though, aren't they? And if you look at
they are overcrowded.
If you look at the rates of self-harm in jail, I was surprised to learn that it's almost double the rate of inflicting harm on other people. So you've got prisoners that are incredibly depressed in prison, in overcrowded jails, costing us, especially for young offenders, which is what we're talking about, up to £80,000 per year per prisoner. So, if you're going to extend those sentences, you're going to extend that cost, you're going to increase the likelihood of their mental health deteriorating. I think perhaps if you look at alternative ways to make sure people aren't offending in the first place or reoffending. So, for example, this contagion aspect of these statistics. If just one father has a son and thereby sort of reduces the chances of that one father's reoffending by 25%, his entire peer group are less likely to reoffend. And that actually deals with your problem, because then they're not committing crime in the first place.
Just to put some figures to this, 67% of jails were overcrowded, Phil, as you were saying. You talk about self-harm incidents. There were over 41,000 compared to some 10 years ago, an increase of nearly 80%, when you think that's nearly 10,000 a week. Now, come back to your central point. OK, so, and I hear what Phil says, and that's very interesting. How does the government get... Are you suggesting the government should sort of encourage potential male offenders to have children?
No, because they're under 20.
Right. So
I've got a suggestion.
I think just very quickly, it's about giving responsibility, trust and responsibility. So
in what way?
So, for example, one of my friends... Well, because people that leave prison find it difficult to get work, for example. One of my friends had a restaurant. It was in Borough Market, and he initiated this scheme of hiring people that have come out of prison in his kitchens. Right. Of course, there's a vetting involved in this, making sure. But it's, I think, giving responsibility and trust. And I think that's what this indicates when you have a son. They feel more responsible. So other ways of making them feel responsible, standing on their own 2 feet, so they can provide for their families, I think may go a long way in helping to reduce reoffending rates.
Okay. My suggestion is, so there are 200,000 children in Britain who are affected by the incarceration of a parent, mainly fathers. So many of those children cannot visit their fathers in prison because we move prisoners around the country arbitrarily, often hundreds, even thousands of miles away from their home. It makes it so difficult to keep families intact. It is not a priority, if you ask anyone in the Ministry of Justice. Keeping a family together, making it possible for a child to continue to have a relationship for parents. It's just not. It's not a priority.
Phil wants prison to be tougher.
I know.
I do want prison to be tougher as a deterrent.
You know, it's so
certainly
interesting. There's a cultural dimension here, because if you research back to the 18th century, you'll find that there is this idea in Britain about punishment needing to be harsh, and even in the prisons then, which we now would regard as abominable, there was always this idea that they're not tough enough. They're not tough enough. Other countries are more interested in how you can rehabilitate people rather than how you can punish them. But we culturally have this attachment to the idea of punishment. It's not working. 28% of adult prisoners and 40% of young offenders are reoffending when they come out. That is not good for any of us.
And you know,
we are suffering because we're failing to rehabilitate. And can I just quickly show? This is Peter Dawson from the Prison Reform Trust talking about the problem.
Now, we have a choice as a country. We can continue with prisons in shocking condition and expect them to get worse. We can pay for it. But at the moment, the Ministry of Justice is looking at huge cuts in its budget, not more money. Or we can start to use prison less. And that basically means looking again at the length of sentences for serious crime, which have gone up hugely by about 50% in the last decade.
It's not working, and the statistics bear that out.
Rachel.
Well, we do have a rate on reoffending, which we're going to see on screen, which is, I think, 29.4% of prisoners come out of prison and reoffend, which reinforces the message, which prison isn't working. But I was very confused by your...
I disagree. There's still 71% that are not reoffending.
I know, but the prisons
That's still
are
a good
wildly...
figure, isn't it?
It's not a bad figure.
It's all right, isn't it?
We've got... The number of people in prisons has risen to over 80,000.
And that's what I was saying about the punishment fitting the crime. Let's have a look at what we give custodial sentences for.
Just on a correction here, actually, for young offenders, it's 41.6%.
The reoffending rate.
Reoffending, which is the subject of the conversation here.
And a lot of these young men have children. A lot of them do. And can I just give you one more statistic?
Rachel wanted to finish what she was saying.
Just because it's relevant, very quickly. 65% of boys whose father is in prison go on to offend. So 65% of people in Phil's son's position would reoffend.
All this takes us in one direction, which is that, you know, families need fathers and fathers need to have sons, especially if they're not going to go down the way. Of course it's not. And I think it's very hard to say that the government has got to step in and keep families together when families fracture themselves.
Honestly, how would you have prisons?
If the well... And also, why isn't
There's a reason there's no glass anymore in the middle.
I'd have people within striking distance who've been able to visit their family. That's just common sense, you know what I mean? But I would have prison as a deterrent, as something you do not want to do.
Have you been in a prison, Phil?
You're going to jail.
Can we just... I think the viewer will be wondering, why does Phil thinks... The viewer... One viewer will be wondering, why don't you think, Phil, do you have personal experience of why you say prison is not tough enough?
It's because people are reoffending at such an alarming rate.
And you
They're
think
not bothered. I see young lads, okay, and I've come across young lads in youth clubs and various things that I've worked around, okay, who are not bothered by going to prison for a couple of months. They just don't care. So when you say reoffending, it's usually people that have done some minor offence who've been banged up for it, where possibly community service would have helped, you know, stuff like petty theft and that sort of stuff, where they're getting banged up because they're repeat offenders. But if you put them in nick, eventually, all right, they're mixing with those people, the reoffending rate.
I think what you're saying is prison institutionalises people.
Didn't you just make the opposite argument? Then you said in minor offences and they're mixing with So in other words, don't put them in prison if they're committing minor offences. Put them on community service.
And that's what. No, right. The point I'm trying to make is the punishment fitting the crime. We're putting people in prison who shouldn't be in prison.
But for far too long.
I mean, so the ones that deserve to go to prison, the ones that have made the major crimes, then you know the chances are they're going to go away for long sentences. By the time they get out, then you get a chance to rehabilitate them. But for the ones that have committed minor offences, let's keep them away from the prison sentence and let's give them something else to do.
All right.
Let's give them some, I don't know, some labour or some community service, something that's as equally minging to take part in and that you don't want to do, OK, but something that keeps you out of the prison system. And therefore we'll cut down the numbers in the prison. Can you see where I'm coming from?
That's where we have
I mean, it's great. I'm hearing he's changed his mind halfway through.
I haven't changed my mind on it, OK? Prisons need to be tough as a deterrent, but the punishment needs to fit the crime. So some of the people in prison don't deserve to be there.
So you're saying fewer people should go to prison, but the ones who do should have a harder time. I mean, one of the issues is overcrowding, because we should shouldn't be in prison there. And as a result as well, you've got 23 hours a day in the cell for so many prisoners because there just isn't the staff or the facilities for them
23 hours in a cell with a PlayStation, a television, you know, and 3 meals a day.
What the state can do in response to your question is, for example, family visits. So, sorry to bring another fact into this, I mean, but 52% reoffend if they're not seeing their family, as opposed to 70% who reoffend if they, if they aren't seeing their family, other way around. So it increases the chances of reoffending if you don't have family visits. So I think there are certain things that are within the remit of the state.
But there has to be some punishment.
Of course. Of course.
Your liberty's been taken away. That is a punishment.